castle in Florida. That's what we're going to explore today. Castillo De San Marcos. Yes, we're here in St. Augustine, Florida. This was built by the Spaniards to protect their claim on the Americas. We failed, guys, but we tried. Look at this place. Amazing. Just amazing to be here. I never thought I'd ever come here as a kid growing up. I mean, Florida History 101, you learn about this place. Oh, I wish I had brought my fishing pole. Can you imagine this, guys? You're actually allowed to walk on this thing. What's a beautiful woman like you doing in a place like this?
Papa took me there.
He only takes you to bad neighborhoods. You can do better for yourself.
Nah, he's pretty good.
He never takes you anywhere nice.
He takes me to all the nice places.
Sorry, my fault. Going on YouTube. YouTube, Florida Hood Vlogs. Florida Hood Vlogs. Yeah, Florida Hood Vlogs. Thank you. Okay. Alright, alright.
Breaks and fires, yeah.
Castillo De San Marcos. This place is packed. Yeah, buddy. Dang dog right there, man. All right, this is amazing. Just like in Cuba, it's just like in Puerto Rico. You know, you're actually allowed to be in here. That's crazy. I didn't think you could actually walk in here like that. But you can. Can you imagine just coming here, putting a line in the water and fishing here? This is amazing. This is the most amazing place in all Florida. No doubt about it. El Castillo de San Marcos, built by the Spaniards here in Florida. St. Augustine, Florida was the first real settlement here in Florida. Although the French had Fort Caroline, but that fort was very short-lived. This was really the first settlement in America. A lot of people from New England think that they were the first. Jamestown was the first settlement. However, that is not correct. So while the history books in the Northeast teach that Jamestown was the first settlement in America, the history books here in Florida teach that this was the first settlement in America. The Spaniards were definitely here. By the time Jamestown was founded, the Spaniards already had grandchildren in Florida. So it's just a little bit of history that kind of escapes the history books to a large degree. But just like Cuba, and just like in Puerto Rico, we have this here in Florida. You know, this is the San Juan of Florida. This is the Havana of Florida. Like, we have in common with Cuba and Puerto Rico this thing built by the Spaniards, you know. Eventually, the Spaniards left Florida, and they had with them runaway slaves, and they also had native Indians that they were protecting within their community. So the Spaniards left Florida, and they had with them native Indians, and they also had with them escaped and runaway slaves that were living freely among the Spaniards. So the Spaniards were here, and back in that area they had runaway slaves and Indians living back there. So it was kind of like a barrier for the Spanish, but they were, you know, within this community. That was a problem for the English, because the English didn't believe in the way the Spaniards were mixing with the African runaways and the native Indians. So the English had a problem with that. Also, Georgia's not too far along the line, and it was becoming a problem with runaways from Georgia coming into Florida, at which point this had really become a liability for the Spaniards. Also, this was not a strategic place for them anymore. If we look towards the Caribbean, Puerto Rico in that direction, straight shot to Spain. Cuba, the port of Havana and the port of Santiago in Cuba are both deep, protected, naturally protected bays. This was kind of exposed here. So it made more sense for the Spanish to keep Cuba and keep Puerto Rico, and to give up this land here. And this was also a treaty. When this was done, when Florida was given to the English, it was also a deal that included problems with out west. So there was a lot of issues that were resolved by Florida being given to the English. Now, when the English came down and they started to build here, they didn't really want to be here. I mean, they wanted to be in Virginia, having parties and drinking wine. You know, they didn't want to be in this swamp out here. So it wasn't really much of an there wasn't an incentive. there wasn't an incentive for the English to want to be here in Florida. They wanted to be in Virginia drinking wine, you know, and then they're stuck here in the swamp. So eventually the North Florida, from St. Augustine all the way up to the whole entire panhandle, which at the time also had Spanish missions running all through North Florida. So basically along I-10 from Jacksonville all the way to Tallahassee, this whole area of Florida was populated by the English on purpose to stake their claim. However, further down to the south, especially in Southwest Florida, around Captiva, Marco Island, Naples, that whole vicinity of Southwest Florida, especially around the Caloosahatchee River and Boca Grande area, which is the Peace River and the Caloosahatchee River, down from Cuba, Cuban fishermen would come and they would go from Tampa basically all the way down to Naples, and that whole area they would fish it, and they would have makeshift fishing camps. Of course, that area was inaccessible to the Spaniards, to the English, I'm sorry. So even after Florida was given to the English and the English officially controlled Florida, they really couldn't prevent Cuban fishermen of Spanish descent to coming into Southwest Florida and doing whatever they did in that region. That's why there's still fishing camps all along Southwest Florida. And there, even in Estero Bay, there was around Mount Key a Spanish fort. That Spanish fort was not respected by the history books of the Englishmen. It was also not respected by the history books of the Spaniards. So if you live in Southwest Florida, you should know that there was a Spanish fort in Estero Bay, but the Spanish tried to cover it up, and so did the English. It didn't benefit either one of them, according to history, to admit that there was this fort of the Spanish in Estero Bay. But eventually, this became land of the English. Undoubtedly, though, the Spanish, when they left, they had boats, and they went to Cuba. And when they left, they took their Africans, and they took their native Indians. And those, just so you guys can understand a little bit of history, especially if you're a Cuban. Us Cubans, I don't understand why countries that have a Catholic background don't know their pedigree the same way as the English. The English are very precise about their pedigree. The English people, like my wife, she's Irish, German, Russian, all that, English, all that. She has a pedigree going back to the 1500s of all her family's generations. The Spaniards don't have that. And I've also noticed that the Italians don't seem to have that. I don't know why the Catholic religion, people with Catholic religions didn't seem to keep a pedigree. Could have been because maybe they had something to hide, or it's just because of the Catholic religion. Something about the Catholic religion prevented Italians and Spaniards from keeping their lineage the way English people did. So my wife, who's American, she knows her pedigree all the way back to the 1500s. I'm Cuban. My grandparents came from Spain. Apparently in the late 30s, my grandparents came from Spain. So I don't know anything about them. When they came from Spain, they had to hide their history and everything because they were leaving for a civil war that was going on. So basically, with all that history relevant to this site here that we're looking at today, is that when the Spanish left here, they had Africans and they had native Indians that were with them in their community. They were native Floridians. So here's native Floridians, like native Floridians, Native Americans, and African runaways from Florida, Americans in a sense, got on the ships with the Spaniards and went to Havana, Cuba. Therefore, in Havana, Cuba, there's descendants of Native American Indians. So if you're Cuban from Cuba, you could have Native American or African American bloodline. It just depends on your pedigree, which in Cuba is something very hard to track. For some reason, it's really hard. Even cemeteries, if you go to cemeteries, they don't keep a good log of people who pass away. So for some reason, the Spanish aren't really good at keeping history. It could be the religion, it could just be the fact that we're not as I think the English are more elaborate with those things. They're more academic, you could say, than the Spaniards. The Spanish were explorers. We like to get on a boat and explore, and the English like to write about it. So it just seems that it could be a cultural thing or it could be a religious thing. I'm not sure what led to the Spanish not being able to keep their history the way the English. It could be a lot of things. But that is some history about this place. As a Cuban, a small percentage, that possibility that I could have bloodlines, you know, and pedigree to the native Floridians of this area, you know, or African American runaways from this area. Definitely Spaniards. I speak Spanish, so just a lot of interesting history from Florida that unfortunately we don't know the exact of it. But I mean, you know, me as a Cuban, it's definitely possible that I could have Native American bloodline from this area, you know. Is it likely? Probably not, but possible? Definitely possible. Definitely possible. So if you're a Cuban, you should know that. Like, a lot of Cubans that are here in Florida, we don't understand the history of this place correctly, you know. There's Native Americans, there's African runaways that got on those boats with the Spaniards and they went to Cuba, you know. Also, a little bit irrelevant, but when Haiti had their revolution, they said white foot, head off. That meant that there couldn't be any white person in Haiti. If you were in Haiti, you had to be black. When they had their revolution, they were the first independent country in the Americas, was the Haitians. They were the first to revolt and have their own independent country, were the Haitians. And that's why the English and the French have been against, completely against the country of Haiti. And the reason why there's so much poverty in Haiti is because, you know, these countries that were world powers back in the day, the French, the English were world powers, they were not going to support, kind of like what they've done to Cuba, where, you know, they have an embargo on Cuba, similar to that. You know, the English and the French weren't going to put up with Haiti being independent. When Haiti had their independence, we know that there's Creoles, which are called Cajuns too as well. But Creole and Cajun are two different things, and I'm not going to get into that right now. But when Haiti, which is in that direction, had their revolution, there's two options for leaving Haiti. Going back to France. So they have the revolt, the French win. Going back to France, if you were a slave owner, that wasn't going to happen. It wasn't possible. You know, your people revolted against you, your slaves revolted against you. You're not going to just run away and go back to France. It was too far away. There was two options. 40 some miles away was Cuba. And there's a lot of, in eastern Cuba, especially in the province of Holguin, there's a lot of French descendant Cubans who think that they're Spaniards, but they're really French. Of course, when the French lose their culture very quickly, French lose their culture quickly. Some cultures, we promote our culture, we expand our culture. The French, they contract their culture. So the French went to Cuba, they went to New Orleans, and that's why today there's descendants of white Haitians from France that are in New Orleans, and that's why there's so much connection between Louisiana and Haiti from a genetic point of view, because that connection, right? So many of the French escaped to Louisiana. Some of those French went to Cuba, which means Cubans also have French. Sometimes as a Cuban we think, oh, I'm a Spaniard, I'm a Spaniard, I'm a Spaniard. We say that a lot. But the truth is, there's a lot of French in us Cubans, especially if you're from Eastern Cuba, like my mom is from Holguin. We have a lot of French in us, more French than you can imagine. But we always say we're Spaniards as Latinos, but especially Cubans, there's a lot of French in there, a lot. So, all right, guys, this is a tour and a little bit of history about this Florida place that I've wanted to see. I mean, ever since I was in school. My favorite subjects has always been history in school. Geography and history are my two favorite subjects that I did really well in school, and this is the place where that history kind of, like this was the pinnacle of it all, you could say, right? And here we are today in front of it. It's amazing to actually be able to be here, and not only to be here but also to be here with the knowledge of history of this place. Hello. So if you're a real Floridian, you know, remember that this was Florida is a Spanish word. It could mean Easter or it could mean land of flowers. We don't really know which one of the two. It could be, oh man, I wish I had my fishing pole. Where's my fishing pole? It's in the back, it's in my truck right now. Okay. It would hurt to fall from up here. I'm wearing slippers. Don't ask me why I'm wearing slippers. I just ordered a pair of shoes on eBay and they delivered them. After they took too long to deliver them, so I was hoping to have new shoes for the trip. So my regular shoes, I used them to work and I got them dirty, so now I didn't have shoes for the trip, but they're in the mail and they're coming soon. We'll get them here soon. So anyways, I wish I had my fishing pole. This location is more my bicycle over there. I hope nobody takes it. Wow, just look at the view from up here. I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I've been all over Florida over the years. I've been up and down the other coast, all the way along St. Joe, Apalachicola. I've been through all those places. Nothing in Florida comes near to the beauty of this place, not only architecturally but also historically. Natural beauty of the area, it's beautiful. This is a spectacular place, and I really recommend that you come here. If you're coming to Florida, put St. Augustine on your list. And that drive from St. Augustine to Jacksonville along the coast was magnificent. If you're planning a Florida road trip, you guys know I'm in Miami, Jacksonville, Orlando, Tampa, everywhere. Trust me on this. Come here to St. Augustine. Get on that. Just trust me. Do it. This is the best trip for Florida. You know, even better than Orlando. My brother's got kids, and they said they like to come here more than Orlando, so definitely well worth it. El Castillo de San Marcos, San Augustine, Florida. Or San Agustino. El Castillo de los Españoles. Increíble, mi gente. Igualito que a Cuba, igualito que Puerto Rico. Mira, mi gente. Figure out how to pay for it. I'm gonna park and then we'll come back home. Might even fish a little bit. country, but I want to ride my bike in the country. My great ancestors built that. Drinking rum. I'll put it on the map. San Agustino. That should be illegal. It's like a nuisance. Feels like we're up in Cape Town or something. This does not feel like Florida. It feels like northeast. I don't know, it feels weird. This is the best place to go. How do you do that?
You have to go to the shop.
Well, I got representing a bicycle. A Subaru.